This is our third question, and it focuses on local history. Ms. Laufer, you'll be the first one to answer. Charlottesville will turn 250 years old next year. A long-standing concern of some of the residents of Charlottesville is related to what aspects of our local history are taught to the children in the city schools. For example, the history of Thomas Jefferson is very important to how children understand the role of that Charlottesville has played in local, state, national, and international history. Yet many of our residents aren't aware of the part Virginia played in the impact of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. The stories of school integration here in Charlottesville aren't included in the history of civil rights. And in another example, the impact of urban development can still be felt right here with the destruction of the African-American neighborhood of Vinegar Hill in the 1960s. The remnants of these historical events are visible, and the emotional toll still felt by many people in the Charlottesville community. How can school board members assure the community that this history is important? What strategies would you like to see used in our schools to ensure students are taught a more inclusive and complete history curriculum?
I think the first thing we need to do is challenge the SOL system, because currently our curriculum is driven by the assessments, and it's difficult to come up with these self-exploratory units. But if we could, I think it's an amazing opportunity for all of our children. Younger children love hearing stories about the place they live in, and older children are really discovering and trying to define themselves and forming opinions in a more educated way. And I'm imagining a unit of study that spans grade levels, starting with the youngest kids having oral histories and asking elders to come into the schools and talk about how they grew up in Charlottesville. And then continuing on to study old newspaper articles and maps and photographs, and then continue on to read court cases and reenact them. And we could probably use our tablets to do a lot of that. And then these are the types of activities I think that really stick with kids and make an impact. They'll discover their own backyard. SOLs don't afford this type of discovery that could be really enriching our kids and creating greater understanding of our past to move on to our future.
Thank you. Ms. Kadija.
Yeah, I think that the school board kind of messed this up about a decade ago by communicating the wrong things by giving up the Jefferson School and its well-established and well-run preschool program. Now, our curriculum, as has been mentioned by Amy, is stuffed to the gills with SOL prep, which doesn't include Charlottesville and its history. I think anything that engages the wider community, different generations, as well as brings education to life for children, should be pursued. However, the issue of local history would have to be weighed by the community against things like arts, gym, recess, maybe a longer lunch period, or maybe even the 15 minutes that the teachers have been asking for in order to answer student questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Blount.
Thank you. This is a very important issue to bring to the forefront to continue the conversation that has already begun in our community. At our October 6th board meeting, along with Dialogue on Race, they brought the initiative to the city schools, to the Charlottesville community around the massive resistance, and we will be having 2 historical markers at Venable and also at Lane, recounting the history and the role that the schools played in that. Things like that are very important to have out there. The community clamors for that, deserves that, and is looking for signs for public display and for public acknowledgement. Things along the lines of what City Council has done and is doing around Vinegar Hill, that is a step. It is opening the door. There is much more that needs to be done around that. The school board is also, we've had discussion around creating a curriculum devoted to Charlottesville's history, and that is something that is in the works. And I really want to see that go through. And Amy mentioned as far as the primary research, that is very doable. Many of our schools are within walking distance, or elementary schools, to the Historical Society. I've taken students there to have them research Charlottesville's history. I have students researching about Vinegar Hill, and they welcome that. They did not know about those things. And other opportunities like that, we have a lot of people in our community who can provide that primary access for research, and we need to capture their voices before their voices are lost in our community, and to document that, and to have something formalized, and that can be done at all levels as well, kindergarten through 12. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neale?
Charlottesville City Schools have a tremendous opportunity to teach American civil rights history. Every day, our school buses drive by historical markers commemorating heroic people and the brave things they accomplished for all of us. In fact, some of the most dramatic history of desegregation occurred in our own school buildings. When you consider Charlottesville City Schools' diverse school system today, there are nearly identical percentages of black and white students at CHS. You can understand why it may be difficult for some students to appreciate the upheaval that occurred in Charlottesville only a generation or two ago. But unlike many places, Charlottesville offers students something beyond the ability to simply read about these events in a textbook or a tablet. Here we have the ability to see history that unfolded in our own communities and schools, and to hear from some of those who are personally involved. I would love to see our schools take better advantage of the history around them, studying urban renewal at Vinegar Hill or desegregation at Venable, or by bringing people into the schools like the children of Mildred Loving or pioneer African American educators like Florence Bryant, who can relate personal stories to bring this history alive. I believe that would not only benefit our students, but perhaps also help address still unresolved tensions about these still very recent events.
Thank you. Ms. McKeever?
It's interesting because I was at the NAACP meeting earlier this month, and the county superintendent did a presentation on the history curriculum and how it's evolving, and that evolving to include all these self-exploratory units, despite the restrictions of the SOLs. And so Dr. Atkins is going to be at next month's NAACP meeting discussing the same topic. So I do think we're in a period where the SOLs well, they're strict, but the teachers are really incorporating ways that we can bring history alive for students. And certainly growing up here, I actually didn't know about the history of Vinegar Hill or even the role that Charlottesville played in integration until I was in college level courses. And so I'm happy that that's actually not the case any longer, but I think that history involves layers of stories, and that the local stories need to be juxtaposed to the other stories that are part of the SOL curriculum. And I definitely think the best way for history to come alive in our city is for an oral history project of some sort that incorporates the voices, as Ron suggested, that are not necessarily going to be around forever, but that we can incorporate that into the curriculum. I also want to say that I definitely see the benefit to the self-exploratory curriculums, because my son, last year they discussed Native Americans, and they built a teepee, and these are the sorts of things that really engage children. So having oral history with people who lived through these times, and then walking the beat, essentially, is something I think kids would really, really value and learn a lot from.
Thank you. Mr. McKee?
Okay, we're on my home field now. This is what I do every day. So this is I care a lot about this. And you know, the thing is, the way I teach history, the way I make it matter is you get down in the gut, you feel it. You know, you think about what it would have been like to live another person's life, to walk in their shoes 50 years ago, 500 years ago. That's what it's about. So no, there's not a trade-off here, folks. It's not about trading off lunch. It's not about being constrained by the SOLs. Because this is how we teach the SOLs. You know, we want to teach about civil rights history. You know, okay, Martin Luther King gave a speech on the wall. That's great. That's important. You know, Lyndon Johnson pushed a bill through the U.S. Senate. Wonderful. But the way you make it real, you may put those events in context, is with those kids walking up the steps at Venable Elementary School and Lane High School. You know, the kids that you could identify with. Or you tell the story of what it was like to fight against River Hill urban renewal. Because you know what? Sometimes you lose. History doesn't tie up with a nice bow, you know, with an answer, something that's over. We're still fighting these battles. You know, and when we go to these issues, when we make it real, when we go sometimes to the places where it hurts, because it's right here, that's the way we not only learn and teach that history in an exciting and living way. It's the way we start to deal with our own past. We start to develop a capacity potentially to transcend it, because that history is still alive, and we see that it shapes what's going on in the classroom that we're in the streets that we walk every day. You know, so I think it's critical that we do this. I think the ideas of primary sources and investigative learning, absolutely, that's the kind of curriculum model we need to be developing. And you know what? Yeah, I don't care about the SOLs. We do what we can to work around those as best we can to make this clear, to make education matter. That's why I get excited sometimes.
Thank you, Deborah. Your question was in the context of this great city's 250th birthday, which is happening next year. So I want to be the first candidate on this dais to wish us a, albeit premature, happy 250th birthday. This is quite an accomplishment, and we can be very proud of all of our history and to study it and to reflect about it. The history of race relations is very important to the residents of the city, and as such, the schools and the teachers in our schools ought to reflect the values of our community. And I believe that local history and researching and understanding the history is a value that our teachers share with the community. I was living in Richmond when Oliver Hill passed away. He was a civil rights leader in Richmond. This was not happening just here in Charlottesville, but in other places in Virginia as well. And I recall it was very sad when Oliver Hill passed away. The community came together in Richmond to mourn his loss and to celebrate his life. And in fact, the GRTC public buses in Richmond changed their reader boards to say, "Thank you, Oliver Hill." It was very touching.